999ers risk their lives every day keeping us safe.
You're putting yourself out there to help other people at their most precious time of need.
But all too often, they're abused and attacked.
Their house is on fire and they're attacking us.
I was standing up with her hands around my throat.
These personal attacks on police, paramedics and firefighters are at an all-time high.
He's telling me, I'm going to kill your wife and I'm going to kill your family and I'm going to kill you.
Leaving them traumatised and unable to work.
How do you come to terms with knowing that you can't go and do the job that you love?
But while the violent criminals responsible are hunted down and brought to justice, our protectors fight to get well and back on the job.
We kept people safe, we put away the bad guys.
I'm not going to let some man ruin it for me. This is my future, this is what I enjoy doing.
Ready to face the next critical incident. Coming up.
COVID-19 is real, people are dying, please move away, thank you.
The COVID-19 pandemic brings fresh dangers for emergency service workers.
I don't understand why people will assault people who are there just to help them.
A surge in coughing attacks.
We're now having officers that are coughed at. They're now using COVID as a tactic not to be arrested.
And how groundbreaking research into the psychology of crowds assists officers in policing protests effectively.
What you're trying to promote is a policing environment where people in the crowd start to work on the side of the police.
In March 2020, Britain faced its biggest crisis in a generation.
The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades. All over the world, we're seeing the devastating impact of this invisible killer.
Assaults on police and emergency service workers began to rise. One form of these sinister assaults was a threat of infection with the coronavirus.
Neil, I'll start coughing you, please.
He's got no respect for anyone in there. He's going to get corona and die.
Stop doing that.
What? What? Have corona?
Doing behaviour like that. I swear to God.
I have got it. Ask the doctors.
Look that way. I swear to God.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you've got corona now then. Yeah, you've got to have that now. You're going to have caught that.
Am I?
Yep.
Interestingly, during the lockdown, assaults on emergency workers, primarily police officers, but it did include paramedics and others, assaults on them increased. And what we saw was more people coughing at emergency workers and saying, I hope you die from this virus, weaponising what is a deadly virus.
During COVID, obviously, we have seen a change in terms of our officer assaults and also sort of the general way in which sort of the public are engaging with us. It's been a fantastic response generally. Unfortunately, that minority, they react and they alter the way that they offend in line with the circumstances that they're within. So we're now having officers that are coughed at. They're now using COVID as a tactic not to be arrested, to try not to be arrested, to try and evade capture by saying, I've got COVID, and it's then obviously then what precautions we put in place for our officers. But we're not allowing the offenders to win. Whatever's thrown at us from a policing point of view, we can cope with, and actually we can keep justice on the road.
In Manchester, keeping justice on the road was not an easy task. In the first 2 months of lockdown, Greater Manchester Police experienced a staggering 170 assaults on their officers.
Why are you trying to hold the cuffs? You really got to go tough on there.
We've got to hold the cuffs.
In this clip from March of this year, 2 officers from Greater Manchester Police are arresting a man and placing him in handcuffs.
Why are you coughing him? Why are you coughing in your face?
Because you're holding me so tight.
Why are you coughing?
I'm holding so tight.
116. Oh, you've done it now.
Yes. You're holding me so tight, I can't breathe.
Just let you know, this guy's coughing in my face on purpose.
This offender pleaded guilty to 2 counts of assault and 1 count of assault on an emergency service worker. He was sentenced to 20 weeks in prison.
How am I getting arrested?
Because there's been an allegation that you've gone at him with a knife and also damaged his car.
In South Tyneside in April, Northumbria police officers are arresting a woman on suspicion of assault and causing damage to a car.
Been arrested, all right?
He's not getting
Now,
arrested.
well, let us investigate what's gone on there, right? In the meantime,
Ow, my head!
yeah, sit yourself down. What I'll say to you is, right, you got on like that, and I swear to God, you're going to jail.
The woman pleaded guilty to assault of an emergency service worker and other offences. She was sentenced to 21 weeks in prison.
We've heard of people now coughing at officers, and I think with coronavirus it's given them an added weapon. It is a concern, but it's something that we just have to deal with as and when.
Who's holding on to it, fellas? Oh, right.
No, don't spit.
This footage is from late March 2020 and shows Kent police arresting a man for suspected shoplifting. After spitting at one of the officers, the suspect is immobilised and a spit hood is placed over his head.
Just calm down, please, mate. Don't get off, please, mate.
I've got corona.
Oh, don't break
I've got corona.
The offender pleaded guilty to 2 counts of assaulting an emergency service worker, theft and criminal damage. He was sentenced to 120 days in prison.
Policing during this pandemic has been, I mean, if it wasn't real, you'd think it was a film. I've been in the job 27 years. I'd never have imagined that policing would be doing what the government asked us to do.
Emergency service workers all over the UK faced an unprecedented challenge.
When the pandemic first started, what went through all of our minds really was how big is it going to get? How much of a problem is it going to be? Will it affect our families? Will it affect people that we know were with crew? And how would we be able to interact with the patients and take care of them without catching it ourselves?
The government rushed through emergency powers to enforce the lockdown, restricting when people could leave their homes and banning gatherings. In the first month of the lockdown, crime fell sharply by 28%. However, police were now being asked to enforce the lockdown rules and investigate alleged breaches of the emergency laws.
During the pandemic, I have seen a change in policing. There was quite a big dip in call demand. There wasn't as many people out on the street. There wasn't as many calls coming into us. There obviously wasn't any nighttime economy, nightclubs, bars, restaurants, that sort of thing. So we didn't see any sort of crimes along those lines. However, we have been receiving a lot of calls from members of the public with concerns for COVID breaches, where people were having parties or gatherings when they shouldn't be. So that was something that was quite alien to us because it's not something that we've ever dealt with before.
Guys, you can't stay on the green. Can you all go home?
In this footage taken on the first day of the lockdown in March 2020, Metropolitan Police officers in West London are clearing Shepherd's Bush Green of sunbathers and walkers.
Can you all go home, please? It's not a holiday. It's a lockdown, which means you don't just come in and sunbathe. Can you please just leave?
Our model of policing is policing by consent. We're not a military police service. We police the public because we are the public, and long may that continue. There was a real risk during this pandemic that would change, which is why it was so important that this engage and explain approach was made.
For many, emergency staff work became more dangerous than ever, with the new deadly yet invisible threat of COVID-19.
I think before this pandemic, we didn't really realise or take into consideration the amount of people that we do come into contact with or the amount of houses that we do go and visit. I think when initially lockdown started, it was quite worrying to think of the amount of people that we do come into contact with and the increased chances of us coming into contact with the virus. Usually we'd speak quite closely to people, but now we've got to be at least 2 metres apart from them. And also we don't always have the opportunity to be able to stand back. Sometimes we have to get hands-on with people straight away, which can be quite concerning because we obviously don't know whether that person's got corona.
During the national lockdown, police often had to put themselves in danger to keep us safe, as they worked to prevent people from breaching the public health orders. Here in Birmingham, West Midlands Police were no exception. In this footage from an officer's body-worn camera, police are called to a street party in Birmingham where more than 100 people have gathered.
Good evening, people. How are we doing? In charge. Who's in charge? Anyone in charge?
No one's in charge.
No one's in charge?
No, it's a
Go on, I'm listening. It's a social gathering, is it?
No, it's not a social gathering at all.
Oh, okay.
You know, we were all learning as we went, but I think we had the right motives and the right intentions, and it was all about keeping people as safe as possible. And I was really relieved with the interaction with the public because they were thanking us for what we were doing. I'm not saying it's like that every day. There have been some real difficulties, and the longer the lockdown went on and then the messages were changing from government, we started to see the public more and more disregard the rules, and that put more pressure on policing.
Good evening, folks. How you doing? Is everyone enjoying themselves? Okay. Well, this gathering needs to stop now, so if you can make your way out the cul-de-sac, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Who lives here? We all live here. Okay, well, this is a gathering that cannot happen under the current COVID-19 legislation and restrictions. COVID-19 rules, yeah. So the reason we are here is to provide safety for people. And by doing that, we need to disperse this group and go about your business. All right, folks, thank you very much for your time and your patience. But this organisation, this gathering needs to stop. For all the best. Enjoy the sun elsewhere. Thank you.
The officers used their powers of persuasion to disperse the crowd. And after several minutes, the partygoers leave the area with no arrests made or fines imposed.
Folks, engagement, okay? Engagement. Get chatting to them, get them moving, engagement. COVID-19 is real, people are dying, please move away, thank you. Yeah, I think this crowd's sufficiently dispersed, all the vehicles have left.
Policing this pandemic has been tough, it's been really difficult. Some of the mixed messages from government hasn't helped. The nighttime economy, so the pubs, clubs and bars, which is a big source of work for police officers, that's gone. Overnight that went. So our priority moved to policing the open spaces for COVID, domestic violence. You know, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, so we were doing so much work, not only policing but other agencies, to try and reach out to people who were the most vulnerable.
In the midst of the coronavirus crisis, police faced another major challenge when one of the most significant protests in recent history took place in several UK cities and around the world. The death of George Floyd in police custody in Minnesota sparked mass demonstrations attended by thousands of people. Keeping demonstrations peaceful and ensuring the safety of demonstrators, as well as the officers policing them, is a top priority.
Public order policing can be really tough, and we have tactics available. You know, in certain areas we have police horses, police dogs in every force area used to great effect.
Many UK police forces are developing new techniques for policing and managing crowds with the help of this man, Professor Clifford Stott of Keele University.
I study how crowds behave and try to understand the psychology that leads to that behaviour.
Professor Stott's experience of crowd dynamics goes back over 30 years.
I started to go along to multiple crowd events and watch them transform. And the one that was most important for me in that regard was the 1990 poll tax riot. I was on that demonstration from start to finish, and it transitioned into one of the largest riots of the 20th century. But that transition couldn't really be understood without taking into account what the police did. This wasn't just about crowd psychology, it was about how crowd psychology is affected by the way a crowd is policed. And where the police get that wrong, it can contribute a great deal to the psychological change that precipitates a riot. The police are a powerful group. They've got the legislation around them, they've got the resources, they've got the weaponry to impose their view on the crowd. But in the imposition of that, through their action, they change the context for the crowd. And it's that change in context that feeds into the change in the crowd psychology that produces the riot. So it's all about power.
After many years of research, Professor Stott concluded that a key factor in crowds turning violent can be how the police behave and how they handle hostile situations.
It's really difficult message to understand because immediately the assumption is, oh, hang on a minute, you're blaming the police. But that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is helping to understand from a scientific perspective the dynamics through which peaceful crowds can become disorderly. And what we now know through extensive study is that a very important factor in that transition is the style and pattern of policing.
This research has led to major changes in policing of large crowds. And in recent years, a more modern collaborative approach has been adopted.
So now what we have in the UK are things like police officers who are called police liaison officers who work in crowd events to build trust and dialogue with people in the crowd. Also, police commanders have a different strategic understanding where they're far more aware now of the potential negative role that policing could play in the production of violence. There's still a long way to go, but certainly we're in a much better place now than we were 10 years ago.
The events of early 2020, however, put policing operations under renewed and intense scrutiny.
We're in a very, very difficult time now with COVID and the impact that the disease is having on different communities. And into the mix then you get an event like the death of George Floyd that flows into a mobilisation of people. They mobilise and as a crowd end up in a circumstance where you have a group of people who pull over a statue in a city like Bristol, and this statue being the statue of the most prolific slave trader in human history. And then you have a police commander who has to make a decision about whether he's going to intervene against that crowd or not. We're now not seeing police commanders thinking crowds are irrational, but understanding that crowds look at the world from a particular point of view. So for me, that was just a really good example of how getting policing right works.
Still to come, another form of a nasty attack on police officers.
There are these vile, disgusting creatures out there who they resort to spitting.
And a paramedic is the victim of an assault during the pandemic.
All of a sudden, the gentleman just started lashing out, punching and kicking.
In cities and towns all over the UK, assaults on police officers are sadly on the increase. Latest statistics show a rise of 18% in a 12-month period.
I'm sorry, I can't. 421, I've been stabbed in the arm.
In England and Wales, there were more than 10,400 assaults causing injury to police officers from April 2019 to April 2020. Latest figures also show almost 20,000 attacks on emergency service workers in a 12-month period.
An assault on a police officer is an assault on society. It's really important that it is not acceptable in any way, shape or form.
These assaults on officers are something which Chief Constable Alan Pewsley of Kent Police is very aware of.
My officer's been spat at, which I think is appalling. Being kicked, being punched and being assaulted in that manner. So low-level physical assault and physical injuries, but mentally quite traumatic. All the way up to officers who are currently sick with serious injuries to their legs, broken limbs. At the very top end, people desperately trying to and carrying out knife attack on my officers, all the way down to the equally, on occasion, appalling the impact on the officer when somebody spits into their face, when they may or may not have contagious diseases, is disgusting. I'm just really disappointed with society that criminals think it's okay to assault a police officer. No, it isn't. It just isn't.
While the police regularly face all kinds of violent assaults, one of the most vile attacks is spitting.
Last year, I was spat at twice, and that was the third time in 2 years. Spitting's probably the worst one. I think every police officer would say that they'd rather be hit than spat at. It's the testing afterwards, essentially, is the pain of it all. And it's hospital. It's 3 blood tests over the space of 6 months. Your initial one, your 3-month one, the 6-month one. And it's making sure you're just disease-free, basically. That's the worry of it all. It's just horrible. There's no other way of describing it, really. It's just a personal low. For someone to do that to you, it's not exactly great.
In one shocking and disgusting case, a Derbyshire police officer records on her body-worn camera as an offender spits at her a total of 24 times. The offender had been arrested and was being escorted to hospital. Spitting is considered a common assault in the UK and can be penalised with a fine, a community order, or even a prison sentence of up to 6 months.
Spitting at police officers is something that's sadly not new. It's something that we've had to contend with. There are these vile, disgusting creatures out there who they resort to spitting at police officers rather than get arrested. I mean, they'll even go so far as to chew the inside of their mouth, create blood, and spit it in the face of a police officer. These are the sort of individuals we're having to deal with.
In this footage from 2017, 2 police officers in a Bristol hospital are attempting to restrain an offender. When told to calm down, he responds by spitting at one of the police officers.
Calm yourself down. No! Do not spit! You're under arrest for assault, police.
Probably the most intrusive is the spitting. It's a disgusting thing to happen. I myself have had it where you've been spat at and it's hit you in the face and you've been spat blood at, during an incident where someone's been assaulted and they spit at you. And normally they know what to say. I have a certain medical disease, I've got a certain condition. Yes, there's the physical and it's not nice, but actually I think in essence it's more the mental aspect as well, because you'd look at spitting and you'd say it's not nice, it's disgusting. But you can, in essence, you can wipe it away. For me, it's the mental side and the bits that you're always thinking until you know.
Sergeant Sean Underwood has been a police officer in Bristol for 17 years.
I've always wanted to be a police officer from the age of about 13 when a local policeman came into the school and talked to us, and that's why I wanted to join the police. I still love my job. It's very difficult. It seems to get more difficult. There's certainly elements of the job now that are a lot more difficult than they were when I joined. Some days it can be very, very frustrating and very upsetting, some of the stuff we have to deal with, but overall I think the positives and what we can do for people outweighs that.
In his long career with the police, there isn't much that Sean hasn't seen. However, 3 years ago, he was at the receiving end of a shocking attack.
We had a call to a male who was on Stokes Croft in Bristol, being aggressive. When we first arrived, we had to try and keep everyone safe and try and control him and calm him down. We couldn't calm him down, he just wasn't seeing reason, he was still being aggressive. We had to take him down to the floor to try and safely restrain him in handcuffs to stop him hurting us and himself, in fairness, because he was flying himself around. He quite easily could have got hurt himself. And then we had to carry him to the police van, which is when the incident itself happened. As he was shouting, screaming, turned, looked at me in the face, and just a big spit came out of his mouth and straight into mine. Your immediate reaction is to just spit and drop and just try and get the horrible stuff out of your own mouth. But we were obviously carrying him at the time as well, so we couldn't just drop him. He was taken to the floor again just so we could sort ourselves out and I could try and get it out of my system, if you like, as soon as I could. I didn't want to catch anything contagious that he may have had. I didn't want that in myself, obviously. I didn't want to pass any risk on to my family as well. I had a young family at home, a wife and 2 young children that I didn't want to go home and then start giving them a goodnight kiss and pass anything on. It was a real worry that what my kid's going to get from this. So I ended up going to my GP the next day for various tests. I did get the all clear and I didn't need any long-term medication. I didn't contract anything. Looking back, I still worry that what could have happened, I think, more than anything else, and what could have been.
This offender pleaded guilty to assaulting a police officer and also a separate earlier assault on a member of the public. He was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison and ordered to pay £50 compensation to Sean.
The average member of the public wouldn't know what we go through on a daily basis sometimes, and what all emergency services workers go through sometimes, which is just the most disgusting behaviour and the most vile scenes and incidents that, unless you've been through it, you wouldn't know how it felt.
And in this footage from 2019, it's a British Transport police officer who is the victim as he arrests an offender at York Railway Station for being drunk and disorderly on a train. The offender was found guilty of being drunk and disorderly and assaulting an emergency service worker. He was given a 12-week suspended sentence, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay £150 in fines. But police officers do have a piece of kit to protect them against this particular form of attack, a restraint device known as a spit hood. Essex Police introduced the tactic in 2017.
We've got the spit hood, which has been recently introduced into Essex, and this obviously looks to prevent offenders from spitting at colleagues. It's placed over the offender's face. As you can see with the meshing, it still allows the offender to be able to breathe as they would normally, but with the film and obviously the meshing inside, it stops that spit from coming out. We will find officers that are spat at, but what we are able to do now is we can get that on very quickly. We can actually sometimes stop any assaults. There's no detrimental effect to the offender because of the way it's been produced. It's only ever going to be used where that threat has been made by the offender, or the offender has already carried out the threat on another officer. It looks funny, it doesn't look commonplace, but remember, we will only use the equipment that we've been given when and justified to do so.
Although these guards are controversial, they are only used when an offender starts spitting, to protect everyone around from contracting infectious diseases.
Since anti-spit guards have come in, we've definitely got better equipment now than what we had before. I'm not sure, equipment-wise, what else we could have that would make a massive amount of difference to what we do day to day. The anti-spit guards were massive, really. That was the one big thing that we were missing out on.
Ambulance crews were often on the front line in the fight against coronavirus. And although the Southwest suffered fewer cases and fatalities than other parts of the country, it was a very stressful period for paramedics.
It was an incredibly difficult time for everybody, working alongside our crewmates, going home to our family, our patients. Everyone was worried because no one knew exactly what was going to happen, how you got it, and how it was transmitted, and what would happen when you did. We were just following the guidance, and we were just watching the news the same as everybody else, just wondering what tomorrow was going to bring. You know, the numbers were scary, and people were dying all over the place, and it was a terrible thing to see and a terrible thing to be part of.
But as well as fear of the virus itself, ambulance crews faced an increase in aggression from the general public. South Western Ambulance Service experienced 290 violent incidents, including 46 physical assaults during the first 10 weeks of lockdown.
I think that we expected everybody to be calmer and more respectful of the emergency services. But what actually happened was people got a lot more anxious, and in their anxiety, that a lot of times has turned to aggression. Within the Southwest, we had somewhere around about a 46% increase in numbers of crews who are abused or attacked, up from around about 190 up to 290 over exactly the same period during the lockdown. We've had a number of our colleagues who have had everything from being punched, kicked, and most recently stabbed. So that's a horrible thing to have to endure as an emergency service worker. It's not what you expect to happen. And certainly when you're trying to help people through what is a particularly worrying time for everybody, not just the normal patients we would go to, but people who are just trying to get on with their lives.
The rise in attacks on emergency staff is something that Mark had his own personal experience of in May this year, in the midst of the lockdown.
We were at Dawlish Ambulance Station awaiting our next job when we got a call to ask us to assist police in the local town centre. We attended to find the police were restraining a gentleman in the middle of the high street. We got out of the ambulance and approached them, and they asked us to assess this gentleman as they wished to take him into custody. At the time, he seemed quite compliant. He was laughing almost. And so we didn't see any great problems occurring. We couldn't predict what was going to happen next. We asked police if we could take him into the back of the ambulance for his privacy and also so we could assess him properly. We took him in there, and in order to assess him properly, what we really wanted to do was take his handcuffs off. Everything was absolutely fine, and we were all chatting and everything seemed to be good. Then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, the gentleman just went mad. He just started lashing out, punching and kicking. The police officers had to try and restrain him, get the handcuffs back on him, and also leg restraints as he was lashing out to the foot of the ambulance where my colleague was standing. And at that moment in time, I saw him get a mouthful of saliva, and it was clear his intention was to spit at me. And as he did so, luckily, I managed to sidestep him. But before I could actually restrain him, he went and spat again, but this time at the police officer, and he hit him in the arm. I had the gentleman restrained by his head on the stretcher, and the police officers got a spit hood, which they put over him, which stopped him from actually aiming any more spit at us. I've never been spat at before, fortunately, so it was a hell of a shock. It's really just vile. It's a horrible thing. You know, I wouldn't do it to my worst enemy, frankly, and so for someone I've never met, to spit at me. It's just disgusting.
Mark was fortunate to escape the worst of this attack, but his colleague from Devon and Cornwall Police wasn't so lucky.
I felt extremely bad for the policeman who was spat on because he was hit worse than I was. Obviously, because of the COVID situation, there is always a worry that any bodily fluids you get on you can cause you problems. I personally didn't have any residual effects, but what did bring it back into focus was family and friends who found out about the situation and just were so shocked. It made me realise that, yeah, this was a pretty bad thing to actually happen.
The offender was convicted of assaulting 2 emergency service workers and being drunk and disorderly in a public place. He was sentenced to 22 weeks in prison.
It's a terrible shame that someone's being sent to prison. That's not something that I like at all, but it sends a very clear message to people that assaulting emergency service workers is a completely unacceptable thing to do.
The attack has changed Mark's perception of his own role and how he feels the public views the emergency services.
It's been a strange experience seeing a rise in attacks on emergency service workers over the period of COVID. It doesn't make any sense to me, if I'm completely honest. I don't understand why people will assault people who are there just to help them. It doesn't matter whether it's police, fire, ambulance, Coast Guard, anybody. We're there to help you. Why would you attack us? Makes no sense to me.
Mark is determined to take something positive from his experience, and he has become involved in a campaign to raise awareness on attacks on emergency service workers.
It's made me look closely at the campaign which the emergency services, ambulance service, police, fire, and everybody else has got involved with, which is called the Unacceptable campaign. This campaign is designed to educate people and to try and encourage people to think about things before they would consider abusing or assaulting an emergency service worker. There's absolutely no reason to do so. It is completely unacceptable. What we're hoping is that by people being punished, people will think about this longer and harder. What we really want to do is stop this abuse, stop the verbal abuse, stop the physical abuse from happening at all. It should never happen.
"2020 has been an exceptionally difficult year for police and paramedics. And while there were a few exceptions, the overwhelming public response has been to cooperate and assist our emergency service workers in their attempts to control and police the pandemic."
When you read some of the headlines, some public might think that the police are there arresting almost everybody and putting them all in prison for breaching the rules of lockdown. In reality, our main focus was about educating and informing the public about what their responsibilities were. And there were occasions where we had to issue fines. The vast majority of the public, it was just words of advice, if that was needed at all. I still believe passionately that the vast majority of the public understood what we were trying to do. We were just trying to keep people safe. It's not about living in a dictatorial environment where we're telling everybody what to do. It's just about making sure that we don't, start seeing an increase in people dying again from this horrible, horrible disease.